Hey everyone, welcome back to DWeb Decoded, a podcast by Filecoin Foundation exploring the intersection of blockchain and the data economy. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today we're talking to Yoon Auh, who's a cybersecurity entrepreneur, an inventor, and founder of Bolt Technologies. We're going to be talking about transitioning to a world of post-quantum blockchains and cryptography. Yoon, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is my very first podcast, and definitely appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, well, amazing. Well, yeah, we like to break you guys in. You know, get these like awesome first time guests. It's kind of a tradition here. So, rising stars, you know, as we say. So Yoon, would love to just start off with you giving yourself a really quick introduction. I know you've gone from building like Wall Street trading systems from back in the day to now building kind of quantum safe blockchain technology systems. Maybe give us a bit of detail on your journey.
Sure. I went to school in New York City, Columbia College, and got out with a physics and engineering degree. Then I just went to Wall Street. I got in together with three other gentlemen who are ex-Dean Witter, if you remember that company.
I remember Dean Witter TV ads from my childhood. Invest with Dean Witter.
That's right. Dean Witter Reynolds,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so they came out of Dean Witter, and these were the days when index arbitrage was done with paper tickets and floor runners, with two phones, one to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and one to the Amex and New York Stock Exchanges, right? And you had boys running with tickets, trading tickets to each of the specialists. But those are the days of $5 spreads, and we helped computerize that whole process on Sun Microsystems, Spark machines, right? And I remember I was coding the part where it was the line drivers to the New York Stock Exchange computer system, which is called the DOT system. And we were so happy to get 9,600 baud lines, right? So dual 9,600 dedicated lines that's bits per second, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So imagine just shoving 500 orders down there on a single 9,600 baud line. That was how fast things were.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is like when Hayes modems was the cream of the crop, right? And everybody was like, I remember shelling out like several $100s for that aluminum shelled Hayes modem, 1,200 baud, right? So those are the days. I did that for about 10 years, worked at Goldman Sachs in their loans and placement systems. But at around the 10th year of doing that, I got an opportunity to work at Credit Suisse. And because basket trading was coming into vogue. So this is kind of like a generalized index ARB system. So basket trading is like every mutual fund that you've ever purchased or, used or, put into your IRA uses basket trading at some point, right? Because they're going to hire their broker. I got to rebalance, or, this company just came in with more cash flows. We got to put it to work before the day is over. And they give you the order, and then you got hundreds of tickets that you got to get down into the street. So that was the agency side of the business. I headed the domestic trading side on the basket trading for Credit Suisse US. And I did that for a handful of years. And then I ended up getting picked up over at Fidelity, of all places, up in Boston. And I ended up working for a new initiative for Ned Johnson. So Ned Johnson hired, one of his trusted lieutenants was a guy named by Jacques Herold. And he ordered him to, basically set up a little test ground called Geode Capital. And that was going to test and explore alternative investing. So because hedge funds were getting bigger at the time, Ned Johnson, being the sole owner, family owner of Fidelity, said, he'd like to explore. And so I was their head trader. So I was like the fifth person hired. And then what was interesting was, I don't know how much you know about Fidelity, but Fidelity is a brand name,
big name.
Retail. Yeah. They have a very big retail presence. They also have a big institutional. but it's driven by retail reputation. So, if you're a Fidelity adjacent employee, you're not allowed to short ever in your personal accounts, right? Short is a bad word to them because they just want the market to go up and up and up, right?
Up only.
But anyway, so think about the mentality of an entire organization at the time, probably like 20, 25,000 people. We've never shorted. And now he wants to run an experiment with massive amount of shorting. so it's like just explaining it to the overseers, the trustees of Geode, who are all Fidelity members. Very interesting, very difficult, and very, it's very strange. And we did that for about a year and a half. That continued, but we got supplanted by some events where their index sub-advisory business. So this is like, you're offloading the management of S&P 500 money or Dow, Dow Industrials money to other people to manage for you, and you just brand name. You go Fidelity, Spartan, S&P 500. It's managed actually by Deutsche Bank. The Deutsche Bank was selling their sub-advisory business to Merrill Lynch and Northern Trust. Fidelity did not want their Spartan funds, which are all index-based, to be going over to a competitor at Northern Trust. And they asked us to compete and bid for their business. Surprise, we won, right? And I was the index guy, and I set up all the computer systems and logic and processes trading to get it working. And we were really proud of that because, once we won it, we had like 2 months to get ourselves all ready for it and come in the first trading day in January, and I get a balance sheet that says 85 billion in S&P 500 money it's under our responsibility.
Oh, wow.
So that's a really strange concept, right? Where you go, oh wow, that's a lot. And but within 6 quarters, at the time that I did that, the king of indexing for retail is called Vanguard Company, right? And within 6 quarters, we beat them.
Oh, wow.
On their benchmark 500. So we were very proud of that. We found all the little nuances and how to reduce all the frictions and get it down to a science on following indices for many indices. And so I did that and for about 5 or 6 years and got poached again up to Illinois to work for a growing hedge fund called Magnetar Capital in Evanston. And I became their, they had a really ominous title, Global Head of Executions. Right?
Yeah, Jack the Reaper, right?
That's right. You would think that I was working for some sort of, other country, but anyway.
Like North Korea or something, right? Yeah.
So I managed the desk that was centered in Evanston, but we had branches out in New York, Singapore, London, and Tokyo. And we had traders in every spot. And we were churning through probably over $100 billion of U.S. equity trades a year, which is at the time, that's a lot of churning. So we did that. I did that. That was my last trading job. I did that for like 5 years. I kind of retired. And
so how does all that that dovetail into your quantum computing then? Because I know you have an interesting twist here. What was the light bulb?
I was never that removed from trading systems and software design because I would always work with the IT guys to put in new features or change some architecture and whatnot. And I even gave the industry a new product which I never even really took credit for, but I told the broker that I gave it to, I don't care what you do with this, sell it to your clients, whatever you want to do. I need it for myself because it's driving me crazy. And this is called the soft dollar distribution program, right? And if you ask around in the brokerage industry, that became a giant business. And so I I think I created the first one because nobody ever heard of it at the time, and I was working with all the major brokerages at the time. But I told them, I don't care what you do with it, but you got to solve my problem, right? And I will walk you through it. And we did that, and it became pretty big. I know that there's several people that I know in the industry who made it big for the brokerages by, embracing it and calling it their own. God bless. Right? What a country. But anyway, so I stopped working, and I thought I was going to take maybe a year or two off, maybe, and go back in some other capacity, but I did not. Somewhere along the line, I remember like probably January of 2013, I realized that while I was dealing with all my personal computing needs, so all my home networks, my laptops, desktops, tablets and phones, that a lot of the underlying software mechanics have not changed, right? And what I mean by that is that if you don't adopt and embrace like Google Cloud, Apple Cloud, Microsoft Cloud, or any of these cloud systems,
Right.
whether it's paid or free, if you don't embrace it wholeheartedly, you're going to have a very, very difficult time to manage your data on your systems, synchronize them, and keep them private. Very difficult.
Right.
You could buy all sorts of products. They don't usually work together. And they all require you to trust a central authority of some sort. And then most of them do not give you the encryption level that may be offered in an enterprise environment, right? Where if you're a retail guy, encryption is the last thing they'll give you.
Right.
Because you're the product, right? Your data is their product, is what they're going to mine, what they're going to keep, what they're going to get access to and buy the rights to as soon as you sign on the dotted line of saying, give me that cloud access, right? And so I realized at some point that this is very disturbing. Why is it so difficult for me to synchronize my own address books across my own devices without Microsoft looking at every one of them, right? That's a lifetime of contacts that I've collected through hard work that they want a freebie access to. And I'm like, that doesn't seem fair, right? And so that kind of started me down privacy and what's lacking in the world. And then you notice some other problems. Some other problems that I notice is that, when we buy new machines, new laptops, new tablets, new phones, you notice that the processes are getting faster and better, right? But also, they will increase the RAM, which is nice because you need, these programs get bigger. But they will like double or triple your hard drives, your SSDs, right? And I don't know about you, maybe you're different because you do a lot of video recordings, but most people never use that.
Right. Yeah, you got to take a lot of pictures, a lot of cat pictures to fill that up. Right.
Not only that, most people they've adopted cloud, so a lot of that just ends up in the cloud, right? And so I'm like, why are we paying for this incredible excess hardware and never using it, right? And so that was another big problem where we're resource, rich, but not resource savvy. And I found that this ability to have private data sharing and synchronization under your control, and the ability to utilize your own hard-earned resources is lacking because of software. That the industries that run this have no incentives to provide that type of capabilities to you because there's no money in it. Right? There's no money in it. The money is gathering the data, sifting through it, and trying to sell you something. Right? I think so. That's so. It occurred to me that if you look at it this way, if you look at it the way that I saw it, the industry is not going to give me the solution that I would like. It's just antithetical to their business model, right? And so that's how I got into privacy. And when I got into privacy, I started teaching myself how to use cryptography. Now, what was careful was I understood enough of the math to understand that I am not going to become a cryptographer.
know thyself, right?
Right. I know enough math to know that I'm never going to add to that field, right? But what I did realize is that you start seeing characteristics of what's being done, how it's being used, and what are the limitations. And then you start seeing obvious frictions that should not exist. And that's where I started doing my research, trying to figure out how do I solve these problems so that I end up with a product that I'd want to use every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the motivation before I started my first company called Nuts Technologies. And NUTS is it stands for Encrypted User Data Transit and Storage. I just called it NUTS because we create nut capsules. But the reason I talk about NUTS is that was the beginnings of how we ended up creating bolts, nuts and bolts, right? And so one of the weird problems of cryptography is that it is a weird set of functions that you have to know how to use.
Mm-hmm.
And the functions that you use it for is based upon what it does for you.
Right.
And cryptography is actually very well structured, but most people, when you ask them, hey, explain to me a little bit about cryptography, by the end of the conversation, you're usually more confused than when you started.
Yeah.
Right? So, the way I like to explain it is that cryptography is built on 3 types of ciphers, right? And they're managed by the categories are by the number of keys that that cipher requires. Okay, so it's a different way to look at it, and it's 0, 1, and 2, right? If you require no keys, those fall into the category of what's called hashes, and you know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
They take arbitrary data and create a fixed identifier for it, right?
And this is pretty commonplace in blockchain systems, right? Like it's this, every
Used all over the
transaction has
place.
this unique hash, like a hash to this is everywhere. Yeah.
Right. So, your pay to addressing schemes are all based on hashes of something, right? And then one key, if it's a single key, that's called a symmetric cipher. And that's a fancy name, but what it means is that both you and I share that one key. And then we could encrypt and decrypt using that one key. And the most popular one that you've heard of, probably everybody's heard of at some point if there's a little bit attuned to cybersecurity, is AES, right? AES 128, AES 256. That is a symmetric cipher. A fun one to know about is a guy named, I think, Daniel Bernstein created something called Cha-Cha, right? So Cha-Cha is another symmetric scheme, but that means that we got to figure out a way to share this one key between you and me,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to send it to you somehow secretly, right? So that is, but the key idea that you got to realize for this one key type of symmetric cipher is that it's incredibly efficient, incredibly fast, right? So this streaming that we're doing right now is probably encrypted by a symmetric cipher like AES, and it's based on randomness. So how do you construct that key? That key is just a big random number,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm going to repeat that several ways, but random numbers are incredibly hard to guess if it's a big number. And that's a central precept of a lot of cryptography, right? Random numbers.
Yeah.
And then we come to 2 keys. 2 keys is where things get a little bit more subtle and complicated. But as you can tell here, that I'm not explaining this on any basis of mathematics, right? But underneath there's a lot of math going on, right? But 2 keys is that there's a public key and a private key. Everybody has kind of heard about that in the crypto world, right? And then there's a relationship between the two keys, and each key holder gets different capabilities that they could do. And that's really all that you got to know, right? That you don't need to know how the innards of the clock works. What you got to know is that that's the characteristics of this type of cryptography. And now the most popular two key ciphers is called RSA and ECC. And we've been living with those for nearly half a century.
ECC
right?
would be elliptic curve, right?
Elliptic curve
Yeah,
cryptography.
which is very widespread in blockchains, right?
Blockchain, I would say it's virtually almost 100% of the asset base is protected by ECC. Right? And ECC was chosen almost by default because it is the smallest key size and the fastest. So compared to RSA, it's much faster. And almost there was no, I think you'll see different variations of ECC being used in different types of blockchains, but it's all the same type of math being used underneath, right? So I don't think there was ever considerations to really use anything besides ECC when blockchain was forming after the Bitcoin paper. I think I did read the Bitcoin paper at one point, and nowhere in there did I see any evidence of a specific digital signature algorithm being specified. That I think it was at a time where it's just, hey, use the fast one.
Yeah, just find the best one, like the fastest, quickest one, basically. Does the job.
Yeah, choice of two, RSA and ECC, right? So I don't think there was any choice. It was just by default, and it was at the time everybody believed that it's going to last forever, right? Now we know that that's not true, right? So anyway.
So why is that? Why is that? Maybe it's a good time to transition into your quantum sort of background here. But like, what was sort of like the light bulb moment here that I'm assuming you perceive that maybe these algorithms are not as durable and immutable as we thought they might be. But then how did that? Where'd your journey go from there?
I think it's because at the time RSA and ECC came into being, the cryptography movement was such that everybody wanted to put their name on the algo, right? It was who could come up with the best cryptography, right? And RSA, the three initials of the three founders, right, of the RSA algorithm. Elliptic curve, I think, is two guys, but they decided to name it elliptic curve. But it was like to put your name on it, and
or things like a Schnorr signature or something.
That's right. That's right.
it's like and discovering like a new mountain or something. You get to name it after yourself.
Right. It's like going to the North Pole, right, to put your flag on it. That was the grand adventure. Is let's find the best encryption schemes. Now, you go forward several decades, the game has changed. It's turning out nowadays that ciphers are literally a dime a dozen. You could get a lot, and they're created by teams of people across the world. So you would have teams of people that are 4 to 12 people getting together, collaborating to come up with ciphers. And so they become almost commoditized in a way, right? And they're so formalized. The creation methods are so well known that no single person could come up with something that could actually compete with a group effort like that. And then the nature of cryptography changed. So as people got more sophisticated, they're like, no, we don't trust the black box when it's encrypting my stuff. I want to know how it works. I want the attackers to know how it works so that we know that it's strong, right? And so cryptography became, rather than this like secret black box, it became open, right? It became where if you don't let me look at it, we're not even going to attempt to use it, right? Because why should we even trust it? So the actual ciphers are no longer sort of like, everybody still wants their name or effort on it, But it's no longer sort of like planting the flag anymore, right? This is more like landfill almost. Like we're gonna build a new island, get the construction guys over here, right? And that's what you do. And but you got to start asking, like, okay, why is RSA and ECC failing? And are these new ciphers that are supposed to be quantum computer resilient? Are they gonna be? How long are they gonna last? Right. So that brings together like a really, really critical underlying foundation of cryptography. And that is none of these ciphers you've heard about are provably secure. None of them, including AES. So RSA, ECC, AES, all of these new PQC post-quantum cryptography standards, there's no proof that they work. Why is that? There's only been one provably secure cipher. It's called the one-time pad. And, the one-time pad is a theoretical model, but it should work because they could mathematically prove that it will work. It's the only one, and it's impractical to use over digital networks. Right?
Okay.
I think you'll see a variation that's kind of inherited from it. Is when you see the nuclear football in movies, right? That's kind of like you crack open the little card, and it's a variation that's based on the one-time pad, how it works. But that's the only cipher that's ever been proven to be secure. So everything else that we're using.
So all of these ECC algorithms that are underlying $1 trillion worth of assets at this point in blockchain world. These are. Are these? Are you, when you say these are fallible? Are you talking about kind of in a theoretical concept of like hey, quantum computing is coming and it can basically rip these things to shreds, or is there even like in the pre-quantum computing era, are we finding instances where these algorithms are fallible and being broken essentially?
It means that the math behind them hasn't been provably secure.
Okay.
Right. So it's almost like what they're saying is like, I think if you look at RSA, it's the hard math problem behind RSA is called integer factorization, right? And that is like, let's pick a really large prime number and then multiply it with another really large prime number that's randomly generated, and that multiplying the two large prime numbers is a very hard thing to factorize. And over decades of trial and error and all of this road testing, they found that, well, nobody's really broken it, so it must fairly safe,
be secure, because
right?
If it wasn't secure, somebody would have broken it by now. Basically, is the
right. So there's decades of evidence that it is pretty secure, right, and that it is a very hard problem. Now the problem is that there's this new thing that they're coming up with called quantum computers. It works in weird ways compared to conventional computers, but it seems to solve certain mathematical equations very well, right? In a different order of magnitude, like instantly. If you're, in theory, it could do it instantly. And that's the main problem, is that the hard problems that these ciphers are based on, a quantum computer solves it easily because of the way it works.
Well, yeah, with the random number problem is, for me to sit here and try to break, come up with random numbers to break this encryption. Yeah, it's going to take me forever. But if you have a quantum computer that has basically exponentially powerful ability to solve these equations, like it could decipher that in instantaneously, right? Isn't that the idea?
Right. So I think one thing that's very subtle but very important is that AES is still considered secure even in the quantum world, because it is purely random number based, right? So random numbers are actually secure in the quantum world as well as conventional. Quantum world, especially Shor's algorithm, says that the types of problems that RSA and ECC is based upon, the quantum computer can figure out that mathematical equation. And so it's not a random thing. It's like if your public and private key is related by some sort of mathematical equation of the type that's behind RSA and ECC, quantum computers could get you there very fast.
Oh, interesting. So it can basically,
Right?
so if it has access to the public key, it can figure out what the private
That's
key is.
right.
Okay.
That's the other side of the
Like
equation,
it's like
right?
a
To figure that
Sudoku
out.
puzzle or something that it.
Right. Now, the trick is, what's post-quantum cryptography? Post-quantum cryptography uses other math type problems that are still deemed to be very hard for quantum systems. And so that's the subtle distinction. But we don't have to go to what type of math is it and how does it work. It's like, that's a rabbit hole you don't want to go into, and I don't want to go into. I think it's sufficient to know that for certain types of equations, quantum can get you there incredibly fast, right? And that's where the main problem is, that now quantum advances are coming very, very quickly. In fact, a little bit faster than what people anticipated. And knowing technology history in the last 100 years, especially if there's a lot of motivations, sometimes technology tends to jump a lot faster than people ever expected. I think that's the main risk, is that if you think it's going to go in the way that it's been increasing and advancing in the last 5 years, you can't account for the jump. That somebody somewhere will have an insight that can make it order of magnitudes faster, right?
Well, let's talk about that a bit more, just kind of the current state of maybe quantum computing as it stands at the moment. And we were talking before the show about this. I've been kind of loosely following this since 2018, at least just following some of the news headlines. And I guess as somebody who's not really technical on these matters, it's kind of hard to determine, okay, like what is sort of real, what is not real. It's obviously, this is a thing that people are concerned about and are working on, but like, is there some sort of like nuclear, like Holocaust type apocalypse threat that we're facing here? How advanced, like when is this going to happen? Is this going to happen tomorrow? Is it going to happen like 50 years from now? I mean, it's kind of like talking about, the singularity in AI. Like, when is this going to happen? Like, some people say it's going to be next year. Some people say it's going to be never going to happen at all. But like, I would like maybe tell us a bit more about the state of just, quantum as it stands right now. And then maybe we can tie it back into the blockchain piece of like, what is, I mean, obviously there's more implications for this beyond just blockchain, but maybe we can kind of weave in the blockchain angle.
Sure. I'm going to be brutally honest here, is that when I got to my 4th year on my physics degree at Columbia, I took a few quantum courses and I said, this is not for me. Okay. It uses a lot of strange math, and the physics involved, the actual underlying things is just developing, and it's crazy. It's a crazy world, right? But what we have to realize is that it's not like we haven't been using quantum computers. Even the computers we're using right now, there's these Intel or Apple processors or whatever, NVIDIA, they all use quantum capabilities, right? You've heard of electron tunneling. That's a quantum capability, right? That's this weird behavior when you have a wall of silicon. Sometimes you'll find an electron passes through that silicon wall without leaving a trace. And we actually use that capability when we build silicon today for conventional computers. We use that capability and know how to manipulate it. Sometimes we don't know why it happens, but it happens, right? So this is like, I think there may be a lot of theories, but the last I checked, I don't know the last time I checked, but I don't know what the reasoning is, right? That this quantum tunneling. And the on the quantum side, for quantum computers, they're using different types of quantum capabilities and characteristics to drive this quantum computing capability. And they're trying to figure out how to scale and harness that at cheaper energy levels, because you've heard that a lot of these monstrosities that they create, they take like super chilling. They're like really very sensitive to motion and vibrations and all of those things. So I think they have the fundamentals down, but they have to now figure out, how do we scale this stuff and how do we do it cheaper, which has always been a problem for any type of new technology. And if there's enough money behind it, if there's enough motivation behind it, we will get there, because we've done that time and time and again, right? And so I think that is pretty well known. So I think IBM, came out with like 1,000 qubit machine. They think they could scale that even bigger in the next couple of years. Willow, with Google in the headlines last week, is like, I think they came out with Willow earlier this year, right? Their headline on their presentation of Willow.
Mm-hmm.
But its latest presentation is how they figured out more algorithms they could run on Willow, which is actually pretty cool, right? Because right now the main algorithm that we've been fearful for is Shor's, right? Which is the algorithm that could break RSA and ECC. But now they've figured out different algorithms that they've taught their little quantum computer how to do it faster and how to actually instruct it to do something. So I think quantum, there's advances from Google, where there's a Google sponsored paper where a scientist came out and said that he's figured out a better way to take Shor's algorithm and optimize it for efficiency so that it requires less qubits, right? I think that came out several months ago. So you're going to have algorithmic efficiencies and optimizations, and you're going to have physical quantum computing advances. And if they start merging faster and faster, we may get to the point where traditional cryptography of the two key kind, such as RSA and ECC, can be broken. Now, between the two, ECC is the easiest one to break. So therein lies sort of a nice segue into why quantum can be a threat to all of blockchain.
Yeah, well, maybe let's go down that rabbit hole a bit. Like, what do you see as the kind of the immediate threats here? Is this like existential crisis, or is this just like, okay, there's a few things that we can kind of do, you know, a Y2K kind of retrofitting and just make everything kosher?
Right. And they have been doing that. The Department of Commerce has a department called the NIST, for National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they are kind of the national laboratory of the United States. And they've been under the guidance of Dr. Lily Chen since 2016. She set up the post-quantum cryptography selection process, right? And so they've been working on it for 9 years or so. And so the effort is there. In fact, one of the new standards they came out with just in August of 24 is called Sphinx. But that one predates RSA, if you could believe that. Right. So some of this stuff is not as new as you think it is. It's been around, but it's almost like machine learning. Machine learning has been around for well over half a century. It's just we haven't had the cheap processing power to actually do it, right? So you know, a lot of these advances are happening in the last 10 or 15 years because of the cheapness of computing. But anyway, she started this in 2016. By August of 2024, they standardized the first 3 post-quantum cryptography ciphers, right? Now, they say 3, but they give you 16 variants based on those 3. Right? So it's not really 3 algorithms, it's 16 algorithms. And what do you do with that? So let's say you run XYZ stack, a blockchain stack, and you got, you know, billions and billions or maybe even $1 trillion running on it. And you're supposed to make the decision. We have 3 standards giving you 16 choices of algorithms. And you go, what are you going to choose? Based on what? Right? You're going to have to take somebody else's word who's going to be a cryptographer saying, oh, this one. Now, what if you're wrong? Then you have to do the transition all over again. And blockchain transition to cryptography is not that easy, right? So it's one thing if JP Morgan has a huge database and everything's encrypted with ECC, and they choose dilithium, and they go change it to dilithium, they could stop work for a weekend and just change the whole database, right?
Yeah.
Cannot do that with blockchains just because of its decentralized nature and that everybody holds keys in their wallets, right? And you can't have everybody come in at a certain 24-hour, 48-hour period and say change over. It's not an easy thing to do. And during the changeover, you have risk, right? Because what's the reason that you're changing over from one choice to another is that the choice that you made has been found to be vulnerable, right? That's obvious. Otherwise, why would you change? And so now you have a quandary. If you're that person, if you're the tech stack manager, you're going to have to figure out which one do I trust based on what science, based upon what evidence, and what if it fails? What am I going to do? Right? And then take a look at this. NIST said, here's the first 3, which spawned 16 variants. We have 2 more in the pipeline that'll probably give us another 5 variants. That's 21 variants, right? And you've heard of Falcon? That's coming down the pike any month now. Then there's HQC. That's another one coming down the pike. And then they have a slew of like a dozen more digital signature algos that they're evaluating. My guess is they're going to come out with 3 to 5 more out of that one. That could be up to 15 more variants. You're talking about 36 variants within a period of a few more years.
So then the question it becomes one of interoperability, right? We're like, how can these systems interoperate if everybody's using a different type of algorithm, and no one like really knows which one is maybe the best, right? We're just using them because they've received a stamp of approval from somebody, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've been like battle tested, in the wild for 50 years.
I've been looking at a lot of the literature that's been put out, and most of the literature around blockchain resilience to quantum computers is DIY, right? It's or DIY, do it yourself, or whatever. It is self-taught as you go. Maybe I'm old school, but I find it horrendous when people think out loud on a blog post, right? Say, like, thinking that it is the best thing under the sun for them to learn in front of everybody else. And I'm like, why are you wasting my time? It's sort of like, that's why scientific papers are good, because it's reviewed, right? And you gotta put it up to some sort of logical scrutiny. But what I do see is that you're going to have this major problem, and you see this problem coming. Let me just point out one more thing that complicates it even further. So I just mentioned that there's a possibility in a couple of 2 to 3 years that NIST standards for post-quantum cryptography could be in the 30, 40 variant range, right? I think choose from. The proof is in the pudding in terms of why so many. What I told you before, which is there's no proof, right?
Right.
That's why they are sticking as much against the wall that looks good to them, and saying it's your problem now. We've done our work.
Yeah, like we're creating the standards. You guys, it's up to you guys to figure out which one of these is the best. So have fun.
And we'll let you know if any of them look vulnerable now, right? No, that's what they say. It's like, so during this 8-year process to select PQC algorithms, they've had twice really, really late rounds, I think back in 2022 and 2023, where overnight 2 of these candidate algos were found to be vulnerable overnight by scientists. And they had to drop them out of contention like the next day.
Oh boy. Okay. So these things can change on the drop of a hat. Basically, what we thought was secure
is right. All that's secure. All that's required is somebody to have a new insight as to, hey, do this, and the magic is gone. This is no longer secure, right? And so that's why they're throwing as much up against the wall as possible.